Let's see. Shall we move on to the next thing?
Sure.
And Jen, you said you had something from viewer mail you wanted to talk about?
Oh, yeah. So we get a lot of email. This actually came in through the Atheist Experience email. But I'm always struck by the number of people who they claim to understand the bodily rights argument, and then they go on to create some scenario in which it would be, in their mind, acceptable to violate someone's bodily rights, or they say something that indicates they don't understand it at all. And so we get this email, and I'll just go ahead and read it here. It says, "Hi, everyone. Love the show. I've been watching your arguments on the abortion issue where some of you make the case for bodily autonomy. Was hoping to get your feedback on this comparison. Let's say you bring your 2-year-old on a hike, and by mistake you get lost and appear to be trapped in the woods at nightfall. Are you now under obligation to allow your 2-year-old to use your body to survive for warmth, emotional security, etc.? If you are capable of preserving the child's life and your own, and you choose not to do so by leaving the child alone in the cold, for example, it seems it would be considered childhood neglect or worse. Is this not similar to being under obligation to allow an unborn child to use your body for survival? Thanks, and I look forward to your thoughts."
Yeah, well, this isn't a question of bodily autonomy, right? This is a question of parental obligation.
Exactly.
So this is a person, I'm assuming, because the child is 2 years old and they are in custody of it, that they have agreed to the legal obligations of maternity, paternity, right? I mean, this is a parent, not just a pregnant woman.
Right.
So exactly.
Yeah.
Not only that, but the child isn't actually dependent on the parent's body for warmth or for survival. So sharing warmth with somebody is not the same as connecting your
but I think
bloodstream.
if I did know my child had hypothermia and I didn't take care of it, I mean, I am tasked with taking care of it.
Exactly.
So the issue would be more like, what if I was out in the woods with a minor and we ended up, going to sleep or something? If the child died from hypothermia, people might think I'm a horrible person for allowing that to happen, but I'm under no legal obligation to save that child's life.
Right.
And it's not because of a genetic connection, it's because of a parental obligation. Because I could be genetically the kid's parent, but maybe he's adopted now by someone else, and so I don't have any parental obligations toward that child. So, when you say I'm going to be the caregiver, I'm going to accept those obligations. You need to carry that out, just like you would for somebody in your care that was in a wheelchair or something, and you need to take care of that person.
And I mean, it's the same obligation. Let's say there's not a parental or genetic connection to this child, but you have care and control of this child because maybe you are
the Girl Scout camp leader.
The Girl Scout camp leader, or the babysitter, or something. You get lost in the woods. You now have an obligation to care for the child, because you have care and control of the child.
Well, you were in the military, and there's a similar thing there. There's certain people that you are responsible for, and certain people you are not responsible for in the same way.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not about do I have to give up my bodily autonomy to fulfill my obligations to this person? It's I've accepted the responsibility for this person, and therefore I have certain obligations.
Right.
And in the case of a child, that may mean that you cuddle them close to you at night to keep them from dying from hypothermia.
Right.
And, oh, by the way, you benefit from that too.
I was going to say, children are very warm.
Yes.
Wouldn't be entirely self.
But, I mean, that's completely different than, I mean, if at the end of this you get rescued, are you under a legal obligation to donate a pint of blood to save your child's life?
Right. If they're injured in the incident.
Right. And the answer is no. You are under no legal obligation to provide even a pint of blood to save your child's life.
And that's a good delineator, because what it basically shows is that even a parental obligation to take care of this child and to ensure their well-being doesn't extend to violating your body in a blood tissue type of way.
Right.
Yeah.
This was originally an abortion question, although it really wasn't quite one because they were conflating two different things. But that segues into a segment that I'm, for now, thinking about calling "Have You Heard the Good News?" which is talking about successes in the world of feminism, one of the things that I think we wanted to do when we started this show up was to talk about how things are moving forward, what we need to do to help things move forward as well.
Right.
And there was some extremely good news on Monday, and does anybody see where my glasses went? And that was, can I borrow somebody's, I don't know what the heck happened to my glasses. Thank you. I am really bad with that. But Utah recently passed, where did that go? Shoot. The Senate, I guess I didn't get that in here.
So, yeah, there was a 20-week abortion
20-week
ban
abortion
that was
ban.
proposed that failed
Right.
this
and
week. So,
what
yeah.
did that, and the name of the ban was really ridiculous. It was like the fetal pain something or other. And
Right. This whole pain fetish that the anti-abortionists have, that somehow a 20-week fetus can feel pain.
And it can't.
Right.
So the good news is the House did not pass it, and that's an amazing thing. And I wanted to talk a little bit about how incorrect that notion is, that they feel pain at 20 weeks. They do not. And the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists said it considers the case to be closed, basically, about whether they feel pain or not. And it's pretty clear that the approximate earliest they could possibly feel pain is 27 weeks. And that's based on science, not emotion, and looking at it and thinking that it's a baby and so forth.
And to be clear, there's no clear evidence that they actually do feel pain at 27 weeks even, just that that's the earliest they could possibly feel pain, because prior to that, the neurological structures necessary to transmit pain is not even in place.
Right. And it says that not until 30 weeks that there is evidence of brain activity that suggests that the fetus is awake. So it may be as late as 30 weeks. And then in this particular article, it was published, I think, in, it was a science article, I can't remember, in the Science magazine. But the last sentence in the article was something that's pretty key. She says, yet another issue is that pain is a part of many medical procedures, and so fundamentally the law begs another important question. And this is controversial, and I want to talk about this. Why does the potential existence of pain mean that a procedure should be avoided?
Well, it doesn't. I mean, in essence, that whole argument is, in my view, not necessarily in the view of Roe versus Wade, but in my view, it has no bearing.
Right.
It's it's like a pointless argument. Whether or not something feels pain is irrelevant. If my child, like what Jen was talking about earlier, if my child is dying in pain and I can stop its pain by donating a pint of blood, the law doesn't obligate me to donate a pint of blood. So my child can die in pain, I can deny it blood, and I'm totally legally within my rights.
Right. And and that's the thing. It's like if someone wants to say, okay, that makes you a horrible person, okay, great, but that's a separate conversation.
It is. It is. And to me, the issue, though, is why would we as a society single out this group and say, you're horrible people for wanting to have the same right that the rest of us have to refuse this procedure? Right. That, to me, the idea that people are saying every other person who has adopted the legal obligation, the parental legal obligation, can refuse this sort of bodily violation except you, because you're so selfish that you think your bodily autonomy outweighs somebody else's life, only because every other parent's bodily autonomy outweighs somebody's life, and you're not even a parent. So that's what's interesting to me, is the way that the society is looking at these two rights and then saying basically that everybody should have this right to allow their child to die as opposed to be bodily violated. But when a pregnant woman who is not even legally obligated by any sort of parental obligations or rights says that she would like to express her bodily autonomy as opposed to over and above her child's life, we are like, oh no, that's got to be illegal.
Right. And that's kind of key because prior to a child's birth, no one has any parental rights or obligations.
It's really key.
I mean, that is, the child has to actually be born before you, have any parental rights or obligations to either, accept the obligations or say, no, I don't want that.
Yeah, and that's part of. I mean, we don't have time to get into it. Maybe one day we can, but that's kind of my question: is that we have social confusion about what endows a person with parental obligation or with paternity or maternity rights, because it's not until it's born that anybody has them.
Right.
And so the question becomes, did you have them because of genes or did you have them because of investment? The woman births it and she's the mother and she's just invested, risking her life to bring this thing into the world. And so we say, okay, you're the mother. But is she the mother because it's genetically hers, or is she the mother because of what she just did? And it's the same what you're talking about, when it comes to legally in this society, the man has no paternal obligations to the child or to the unborn until it's born and is a child.
Right.
And then he gets rights over, or obligations. He can go to court, do what he needs to do. But the law will understand that because of the genetic input, he has this a legal standing to at least come forward and try to claim rights. So I think our society is like super confused about what constitutes, you'll see lawsuits all the time with adoptive parents and biological, and it's such, what constitutes paternity, what constitutes maternity? Is it really genetics or is it investment, and how do you make that call? It's a weird thing. I think we have a lot of confusion around that. But that's a whole other can of worms.
A big can of worms.
Yeah. Yeah, we should have that conversation in a subsequent show.
Except there's no answers.
Yeah.
It's just a question.
Yeah. Case by case, for sure. And that's why we leave it to the legal system, because they have the resources and the know-how to
But
sort those
you
things
had
out.
that. Did you find your article?
Which one?
The one about the abortion vote?
I didn't.
Okay.
I don't know if
I think it was 51 to 46, if I
Yes,
remember
you found it.
right.
That's
well, I didn't find it, but I.
Oh,
I
those were the
remember.
numbers.
That's my memory.
Right.
But I do have the PM about it, so I can pull up the link here.
Oh,
probably,
thank you.
and find that. And I actually have another Texas abortion article that we can follow up with. That's a guy that wants to ban it entirely.
Yeah.
So this is
I think we had that
20-week
conversation
abortion
back
ban
in 1973.
fails. Yeah.
So,
Yeah, really. This has been tried. So a bill that would criminalize abortions after 20 weeks of pregnancy failed to advance Monday in the Senate. Oh, sorry, I've got some sound coming out of my computer. Let me turn that off. Okay. A bill that would criminalize abortions after 20 weeks of pregnancy failed to advance Monday in the Senate. The Pain-Capable Unborn Child Protection Act needed 60 votes to advance in the Senate, but it was blocked by a procedural vote 51 to 46, which I think is relevant because that is a single-digit margin.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Yes.
The bill and the majority was in favor. So this is scary. The bill, which includes exceptions for instances where life is at risk in cases involving rape or incest, was passed by the House of Representatives in October. Similar legislation failed in 2013 and 2015, and yet they keep trying, right?
Yeah.
Of course.
Unlike the past two attempts when President Barack Obama was in office, the bill this time had support from Republican President Donald Trump. Similar legislation is already enacted in several states, but opponents of the legislation argue 20-week abortion bans are unconstitutional.
They're unconstitutional, and it doesn't even make sense in terms of the science. This is clearly coming from an emotional place that ignores important issues, and
Well, and the other thing is that if you need a late-term abortion, you may not find out that there's something catastrophically wrong with the fetus
Until
you're carrying
20 weeks.
until you get the 20-week ultrasound.
That's when you
at which
find out.
point, it's already too late
Right.
to do anything about it.
Yeah. I mean, at a certain point, you can push it back so far that a person wouldn't even have time to know they were pregnant.
Right.
Right,
And
so-
that's basically what they're
Yeah.
They're trying to do.
they're trying to do.
So they push it back, and then they put delays in place and basically say, but if you go outside this window,
Yeah.
right? But there's a 3-day waiting period, and you have to have 2 visits to the clinic, and then you have to,
Yeah.
you know,
And there's only one clinic.
Yeah, in
anywhere
100
near-
miles.
Yeah, et cetera. Yeah, obstacles. It's criminal.
Right. Well, and I think that's one of the reasons that the concept of the, a medical abortion or the medication abortion where you just take pills.
Yeah.
I think that's so threatening to a lot of the anti-abortionists because it's done early in the pregnancy and because you're just taking some pills.
You don't know?
It's kind of democratizing abortion.
Right, they can't control it.
You can't know when someone is having an abortion because she's just taking a pill.
Yeah, and she's doing what she needs to do with her body and
Yeah.
her life.
Yeah. All right.
Right?
So this one, just to say, this is Texas State Representative Tony Tinderholt. He's put up his legislation that is called the Abolition of Abortion in Texas Act, and he just wants to straight up abolish it.
Yeah.
Doesn't want it to be legal.
I have some advice on how to abolish abortion in Texas. Make birth control free.
It worked in Colorado.
Yeah.
It didn't
Well, I mean,
eliminate it, but
didn't
it
eliminate,
reduces
but
it.
yeah,
Right.
the abortion rate plummets, the
Yeah.
teenage pregnancy rate plummets. Women and children do better.
Mm-hmm.
When women and children do better, the entire state does better,
Mm-hmm.
economically, socially, politically. Everything, good things happen when you put women in charge of their own reproductive lives.
Right. So, not having access to things, birth control, why would they have a problem with that necessarily? I know that's the question seems silly, but
No, the problem
You know where
is
I'm
that
going.
when people don't know why they oppose a thing, right? Like, so when you're opposed to something and you don't really know why, a lot of times you look for reasons why. And this is when you start to see reasons that don't make sense.
that's exactly what I'm talking about.
So when you look at it from a perspective of logic, it's, well, if you don't want people to if you want to reduce the abortion rate, then you should prevent pregnancies. That would make perfect sense. The reason that they're opposed to the birth control, if you go and look at their opposition to it, they have like this slew of, it's unhealthy, which a lot of unhealthy things are totally legal. They will get into, this is going to promote sexual promiscuity among the kids. This is going to like drive up pregnancy rates. This is going to, and so they come up with all these reasons. But really what's happening, the reason you're going to keep seeing opposition to what seem like common sense solutions is because their real problem is sexuality outside of their particular vision of what sex is and how it should be done. So if you're violating that, they have a problem with you. And they are not going to allow it. And they can't, if they would acknowledge this is like a religious restriction, it applies to me and people that are within my religion, it wouldn't be a problem. The problem is that they are bothered that other people aren't subscribing to their religious, moral dictates or their religious prescriptions. It's not even really morality, it's just rules. So it's like religious prescriptions that they think everyone should have to subscribe to. They don't see it as like a personal religious issue, or they're not capable of understanding that it is. Like this guy, Tinderholt, he explains that, quote, he's a firm believer in, he is, quote, a firm believer that God creates children in his own image, regardless of how that child is brought into the world. It's created in his image, and how can someone want to destroy that?
Wow. So they're looking at it through their own set of blinders about
This is a guy who's putting forward legislation to ban abortion because of his religious view on abortion.
And not just that, but how he views sex should be it should reflect his sexual world.
Right. When you see something
in
outside of that,
marriage.
they're opposed to it, right? They're opposed to homosexuality. They're opposed to transgender. They're opposed to anything that does not fit their model. They are going to oppose it.
And there's another aspect of that. It's also just an ignorance about what people experience. There are married religious people who don't have access to, it's difficult to get access to birth control. So he's assuming that if you're married and religious, that you're somehow going to have the resources to do, or agree with him anyway, for that matter.
And their view on that is that if you're married and you should be open to having as many children.
Yeah, you shouldn't need to be
as
on birth control because
possible.
you're married.
Right.
So everything revolves around this Christian model of sexuality, which has dominated basically our society and our culture for thousands and thousands of years now. And I believe that the damage it has done by inserting itself as a unquestioned reality is horrendously broad.
Yeah.
I think that there's a lot of harm that it does that people aren't even aware of. I just made a small Facebook post the other day, and it was amazing to me how many people posted on it to say, oh my gosh, this rocked my world because I never thought of it this way. And all I was saying was some really basic things about sexuality and marriage and how sexuality long-term in relationships for most folks is not going to maintain. And that when you hit a certain point, when one of the parties decides, I'm not interested in sex anymore, there's really no excuse to trap somebody in a situation where they cannot have sex and they have to stay married, or they're going to be in the marriage, but they are not allowed to have sex. And it's like weird because you end up in this situation where you're sexually exclusive with somebody who's not having sex with you. And now you're sitting there saying, wait a minute.
Yeah.
This isn't, why
This
am
is
I
the one
sexually
reason-
exclusive with the person who's not wanting to have sex with me?
Right.
This makes no sense. But there were a lot of people that posted on my wall that were like, I've never thought of that. Never thought of it that way. And it's like, yeah, you're trapping yourself by the vision of exclusivity. But we have this model, this social model, where if you step outside of that, you are evil. And most people, because of the pressure to not even suggest that you should be allowed to step outside of that, are afraid to even come forward and talk about it with their partner. They won't even come forward and say, look, you're not interested in sex with me anymore. I would like to go out and have sex with other people. Or just, I am going to go out and have sex with other people. I'm not the type of person who cheats and lies, so I'm telling you.
Yeah.
Just be assertive and say, I can't do this. You can do this, and that's fine. And I like all the other aspects of this marriage, but not having sex is not an option for me. So I'm going to go have sex. I'm willing to stay married to you. If you want to leave me, that's your right. But I'm not going to go the rest of my life without sex. But there are people who look at that and they're just like, oh, what a monster who would put their spouse in that position. But it's like some of these people, just like what I was talking about on the thread, have been through multiple rounds of going to see a therapist. So these aren't people who are just like, oh, I haven't had sex in 2 weeks and I'm going to do this. It's like these are people who for years have been struggling with this issue and their spouses are not sympathetic. A lot of times the spouses are just like, oh, it's just because we also do that, right? We tell people, well, this is what happens. How many jokes are there about when you get married, you don't have sex anymore?
Right.
That is a running gag. Get used to it. Join the club. None of us are really having sex anymore. Last time I had sex with my spouse,
Well, the joke I heard decades ago from a guy in flight school who just gotten married, people were telling him the joke. That the first year you're married, every time you have sex, you put a nickel in a jar. And then after the first year, every time you have sex, you take a nickel out of the jar and you never empty the jar.
Right. I mean, it's a joke, and everybody chuckles about it, right? We all get it. We all get the joke because we have a model where it's normal to partner with a person and then stop having sex and never have sex again and then go to the rest of your life either not having sex or cheating on your spouse.
Right.
And you're either unhappy because you're not having sex or you're cheating and you're a monster.
I'm so glad we live in a day and age when divorce is an easy and mostly acceptable thing.
It's legally, I don't know how easy it is. I handled my own divorce, and it was several times
they can
more
be
costly
complicated.
than my marriage, even though nobody contested anything. I mean, this was complete, everything was
Right.
agreed to. Plus, I had to go through months of waiting and procedures where I had to file at court, and then responses had to, and this is, like I said, with both parties agreeing to the settlement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then finally I had to go before a judge and literally get the judge to sign off on this, talk to me about it, and then I had to go carry it and get, so it's like when I got my marriage license, it was nothing. We went before a judge, that was it.
When I've been married twice. My second and last husband, he's the keeper. The first one, we got married, and I signed my name on the marriage certificate with my new name, and that's all I needed to do.
Yeah.
When I wanted to go back to my real name after I got divorced, oh my God, the paperwork that I had to do.
Yeah.
my passport looked like a book because there was so much stuff that had to be added to it, and all the paperwork, and I had to go to it was a pain in the butt. So yeah, I understand.
Nobody
Yes,
needs
it's
a
hard.
lawyer to go get a marriage
Right.
license.
But
Right.
it's not like, but it's not like 100 years ago where you just sit.
Yeah,
and
you're
did.
allowed to do it,
Right.
but people don't want to do it too. The other thing is there's a huge emotional investment cost because of the way we look at it.
That's true.
And that's the other thing that I think is a social, we look at this as like, oh, this is a reality. And it's like, no, it's not a reality. This is a social construct that these relationships are, that it's like devastating for this relationship to end. That is not the way it has to be. It's the way we treat it. You're supposed to be nasty to each other. You're supposed to make it as hard as possible. You're supposed to fight about custody of your kids. You're supposed to go, just snarling at each other about property. You're not supposed to be friends. You're not supposed to say, hey, you know what? It was a good run, but we're not having sex anymore, and we're kind of just coming and going like roommates. And we've been to a couple counselors, and I want to leave this while we're still friends because I'm starting to resent you for not having sex with me. And it's wrong for me to blame you for not having sex with me, right? And that's the other thing. The partner who's not having sex, what are they supposed to do?
Right.
If I am not inclined to have sex with somebody anymore, if I'm not attracted to them, if I'm not sexually inspired by the person, what am I supposed to do?
Right.
Just like pretend I like it? Or, I mean, geez, what a nightmare that is for somebody to be pressuring you to have sex with them, and you're just like, I don't feel it anymore and I don't want to hurt your feelings, but you don't turn me on anymore.
Right.
And so both parties are tortured in this mess over the presumption of sexual exclusivity as this must be. And it's just like, no, there's options. It's just that our society doesn't even, and like for the people on my Facebook wall, it was just like, this is such a simple solution, and I didn't ever think about it. Like, I just thought, I'm trapped. And I thought that for the longest time, right? I thought, I'm what do I do in this situation? I kept floating like, hey, if you'd like to go outside the marriage, I'm okay with that. Just so long as we're both aware and everybody knows what's going on. And I couldn't get a conversation going. And it just finally reached a point where I had to come forward and say, I'm not dead yet, and I'm not ready to give up sex, and I can't speak for you, but I'm going out to find romance, and I'm not inclined to leave you or destroy the marriage over it. But if that's what you need to do, you have that right, and I'm not going to lie, I'm not going to cheat, keep you informed. Handle it how you want to handle it, respond how you need to respond. Just, I'm giving you an FYI. And I just think that people are afraid to have that conversation because they're afraid, oh, what if they say they're leaving me? And I thought, hey, what if my spouse had said I'm leaving you? And frankly, he didn't, right? It wasn't until later that we got divorced. But it's like, at some point, you just have to go to the person, be honest, say, here's what's going on. This isn't working for me. I need another solution. And if we go to counselors, if we have conversations, we can't find the solution. I need to go somewhere else and get this, just like if there was no food in the house and there was not going to be any shopping, there wasn't going to be any cooking, and I would decide to go have dinner somewhere else, you can't really fault me for that. So at a certain point, people just need to really see to their own needs, but I don't advocate doing it dishonestly.
That's the thing.
But at the same time, I think about, for example, the stigma that was put on homosexuality for how long, right? And so you had all these gay people that were getting married. And, of course they were lying. Of course they were not honest and out, right? But we look at that with compassion and we say, well, our society puts so much pressure on people to not be gay and for everybody to be straight that nobody could be out and open and gay. And we are not at a point where we accept the polyamorous perspective at the rates that polling shows it should be probably practiced.
Yeah.
Right? So the number of people who express that they would want more than one partner or that they would want sex outside their current relationship in addition to keeping the relationship does not correspond to the number of people who identify as polyamorous. Not by a long shot.
There's you've probably read it. There's actually a book out called Sex at Dawn that explores sort of the I guess evolutionary basis for polyamory in humans. And it points out the fact that we are as closely related to bonobos as we are to chimpanzees. And bonobos,
Right.
they settle conflict by having sex. I mean, that's how they celebrate things, by having sex. Everything, revolves around some kind of sexual expression.
And that's another thing that people buy into without question is this, they'll throw down the concept sex is for procreation. And it's like, you know what, when you observe human beings and when you observe other species, there are some species, including human beings, where it appears to be for social purposes primarily.
Yeah.
And we're actually not good at reproduction when you compare us to other species.
Yeah.
We're poor reproducers, despite the fact of our population numbers.
Yeah.
I think it was something like a study where they did human beings trying to have a child. So these were couples who were trying to have a child. The average number of sex acts required for a pregnancy was 104.
Holy cow.
And I think with apes, like gorillas, it's something like 12. We are not very good at reproducing. We're very bad at it. And sex for us, we have all kinds of things like the hidden estrus, right? Women, you don't know when a woman is really fertile. It takes all kinds of stuff to figure that out if you want to do. And so there's all these things to show that women are in humans are built to have sex or I guess sexuality is something that we can do anytime. And we can, I'm catching myself here. I had to catch myself because I actually said women are built for this. And I thought up to myself, what a slight toward trans women.
Yeah.
What I just said, right? But and then I had to stop and think, like, how should I express that? That's a question.
Yeah.
I'm asking.
I don't know. I think that.
I recognized the problem with what I expressed,
Yeah.
but I didn't know how to re-express it.
Yeah. I don't know.
Women or cis women? Maybe, I don't, whatever the term, but the presumption, when you look at the what we consider to be the biological, map that you see of the female body, there is not like a time when they
Right.
when they can have sex. Like there's a lot of other species, they're only open to
and
sexuality at
there's-
certain times.
There's a lot of theories about, the hidden estrus was basically to keep a male partner around because human infants have such a long development period and you need another partner around helping provide for, the infant. But, historically humans traveled in hunter-gatherer groups and, I guess the anthropological evidence suggests that the entire group was invested in the children and that, not having the actual biological father of that child available to help wasn't really a big deal because you had other women, you had, the other men in the group.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like it was only the biological father of the child providing for that child.
Yeah, and we talked a little bit even before we relaunched this about different cultures who have different models of
paternity,
what is considered paternity.
Yeah.
And the idea that we have as a culture, like we think of that in terms of this is just how it is, and it's like no, this is how culturally we look at this.
Right.
There are other models of paternity in other societies where they don't look at it that way, where the fathers don't even aren't required to have any responsibility for the children that they father, that it's up to the mother's family owns the child, like, from a legal perspective.
Yeah.
And it's her brothers and things that are going to be like the male models for this kid. The partible paternity cultures where every guy who's having sex with her is a partial father.
Yeah.
And has paternal, duties for the child. It's broad. So.
Well, the system as we have it that you were outlining, it goes back far enough that I don't think we can draw a lot from it biologically and in terms of behavior. I think you have to be very careful when you say that X behavior relates to such and such evolutionarily or humans, the hidden reproductive system and all that, or the hidden estrus thing and all that.
I know.
A
A lot of that comes across as kind of a bunch of just so stories.
It is a lot of it. You have to be very
Sociobiologists
careful
came up with, or now evolutionary psychologists came up with to.
Right, but I
kind of
mean,
bootstrap an
like I said, you can look at
explanation on-
polling where 3/4 of men and women are basically saying, I would like to have more than one partner,
Right.
but I know I'm not allowed.
I think it's
Yeah.
pretty clear that we're not a monogamous species.
Yeah, but it's also clear that we're sexual
Right,
and
very much
we're
so.
not very good at reproducing compared to other species. I mean, the models that we have a lot in common with species that are socially sexual. And there's not much to support an idea that it is just a given that reproduction is the primary purpose of human sexuality. And I think it seems to be not a given because people are driven with sex, and there's a lot more going on there than just
Most of the sex
reproduction.
we have is non-reproductive sex. And that's true whether you're gay or straight or whatever. You know, people are having sex because it's fun.
Well, masturbation, for crying out loud in a bucket.
Yeah.
I mean, nothing to do with anything but feeling good.
Right.
You know, and then there's a drive to do it. You can't.
But I do think it's a fair point to say that any or all of this does not have to be biologically justified.
Exactly.
You know, that a person's choices in regard to their own sexual destiny are their own, and not and whether it would align with any kind of physical reality or not is irrelevant.
Back on the Just So stories, one of the worst offenders, in my opinion, is Desmond Morris. If you've read any of his books, he's written books on cat behavior and dog behavior, I think, and human behavior. And just reading through the book on human behavior, I just cringe. And then I see people cite what he says. And I just cringe. Please, if you are a fan of Desmond Morris, rethink your fandom. He really does not know what he's talking about. The cleavage resembling the buttocks thing, I was like, oh, for crying out loud. What in the world? By that sort of logic, any fold, like the fold between my toes, should turn men on. What the heck? That's just ridiculous. It goes on with that sort of stuff. And the pubic hair thing, I mean, it's clear in animals across the board, everything from butterflies to humans, that hair that's in a bizarre place that serves no other purpose is to disperse odor.
So I have a stinky head? Like what does that mean?
Your armpits,
Like eyebrows?
and the eyebrows are for signaling, probably. I mean, that's a guess there. But the ones that are really bizarre, the hair on top of your head,
Okay.
serves. It's probably a protective thing. But
That makes
pubic hair and armpit hair disperse odor.
And there's stinky positions for hair after.
And it advertises. I mean, in a normal reproductive organism, we wouldn't be washing all the time. And so it would be very clear if we were in a group, whether you had mated recently, whether you were more in the mood or not, that sort of thing. And when you hit puberty, everybody will know when you're of reproductive age. Goodness knows if you have a teenage person in your house, you know when they have started to hit reproductive age.
I'm about to have a teenage person in my house.
I have, I have one.
Yes. Yes.
And showers are important.
Yeah, we had that conversation with him. He walked by one day. I'm like, dude, you stink.
Yeah,
You need to be using deodorant here. Let me take care of that for you.
Right? It's hard to be around junior high because if you ever go into a junior high classroom, they're at that age where they're just kind of hitting it, and they don't know that they smell, and they don't know that it's not really cool.
Well, what's cool is my son is kind of a rule kitten. So once I told him,
nice.
here's your deodorant, use this every day. He's like, okay, that's a rule. I got to use that every day. So he does.
Right on.
So, yeah.